morning. My name is Philip Green, and I am a multimedia instructor here at Forbes Road Career and Technology Center. And we are going to be talking today about our case study from last year, where we were actually able to function in a manner that was very, very effective, I believe, in hindsight. Initially, we did not know, like most other people, exactly how we were going to manage in the spring of 2020 when we were informed about the challenges of COVID and the pandemic, and informed that we were no longer going to be able to attend in person. So as a result, what I want to point out is that it was a big disconnect. Okay, and then at that particular time, none of us, I feel comfortable in saying, probably knew, or not probably, knew the direction we were going to end up. There was a lot of speculation. It could be a short period of time, but it definitely at that point changed the way we were engaging. Up to that point, it changed the way our engagement totally. And one of the things going into that particular, all the information, all the hype around what was going on, and rightfully so, in a worldwide pandemic, and people were becoming very ill and even losing and their loss of life involved. One of the things that came to mind for me was the recognition of the fact that we were disconnected, not just physically disconnected, but there was a disconnection from the students in terms of our relationship. Like the relationship all of a sudden was broken. And so when I started thinking about what things we could do at that particular time, and I'll get in a little bit more detail as we go through the slides. But when we started initially thinking about what we could do, my first thought was I started thinking about what the students might be going through. In a lot of cases, people were beginning to lose jobs. People could not run on the stores. People did not have supplies. We all remember toilet paper and things of that nature not even being available in stores. And there was a lot of things going on. A lot of news was coming forth. A lot of information was being put out on the internet, digitally, news channels, everywhere you go. And so I started being concerned about the students. It seemed as if adults were overwhelmed. I started being worried about what the students were actually going through. And I think that when I put up here, connection is more than physical, that rang very true for me. Because at one, the students are here and then they're not here. And that's a good portion of their day. And there's just a lot that went into that in terms of our connection. And my concern for the students' well-being at that particular time went beyond just concerned about what skills are we going to do Nocti, we're going to do this and that, different things of that nature. And so we presented, or I felt like, well, we really need to get back connected with them, not just physically, but we need to make that emotional connection, that mental connection, that social connection with the students as quick as possible. Because with all that's going on, I felt like the students needed a distraction, and why not education? And I'm sure some people maybe even rolling over in their grave, educators from the past, saying education is a distraction. What is that? What could that possibly be? But in this instance, it was in fact giving students a way to focus on something other than the dire straits that them and their family might have been in as a result of facing the pandemic. And so we began to think about it from that perspective, and it presented us with the challenge. We had, in fact, a broken, starting obviously, physical connection, and then as a result of that connection being broken, we had the emotional connection broken. We had the social connection broken. And it was a need then to first and foremost reestablish or reconnect. So we needed to fix it right away, and everybody was scrambling. You know, I can remember some of my own. I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old who were a couple years ago, and their school was doing a few things that I thought was actually groundbreaking in how they were engaging. So I was able to glean a couple of ways that they were addressing that from them. And even in our school, we had to scramble like everyone else, come up with the strategy because no one had ever been faced with what we were facing at that point. It was a brand new territory. And so here at Forbes, we determined that we were going to right off the bat recognize that some kids or students rather may not even have internet. They may not have it, okay? So we initiated with the phone calls and paper packets. And I think a lot of people might have jumped out on this particular way to reestablish the connection. Okay, let's get on the phone. Let's call the parents. Let's call the families. Let's at least check in, see how they're doing. Are they affected? Obviously, we weren't asking people if they had contracted COVID or anything, but we're just in general concern for the well-being of their family structure, what was occurring, with the student, and was the student then available for information, and making sure that we were providing some work that they could do in that space, whatever space they had in their homes. And so we got the paper packets together, a few weeks of work as we anticipated coming back in a short period of time. Obviously, that did not occur, okay? And what we quickly realized is we needed to establish a virtual engagement. We needed to establish a way of connecting with the students when they weren't physically here in the classroom. And so this wasn't, what I'm going over, sort of the overview. Most schools, if not every instructor, of course, went through this type of unveiling of the challenge back in 2020 spring. So, and when we look at this as virtual engagement, we said no internet, obviously, there's a pun here, gets left behind. In fact, paper packets only went so far. You can collect them, but there's no engagement with the student other than writing out instructions for them to follow, making it easy for them to connect with those instructions and hoping that they were able to follow that and get the work done. But there was still no actual engagement. So then we started figuring out, okay, we need to connect. And, whether you want to say programs like Zoom, Google Classroom or whatever, were sort of godsends at that point because they showed up for us and allowed us to work through some of the fears associated with using those programs, first of all, right? And then actually make a connection with the student. That was huge for me. It was huge. The first couple of times we connected, I didn't even talk about schoolwork. I just wanted to see how they were doing. How are you doing? How are things going with you? And how are things going in your environment in terms of your availability? Some of them, you have to be visible and available to be taught. You can be visible, but you might not be available because everything else is on your mind. So, therefore, that's why we talked about education as a distraction. So we wanted to address equipment challenges right off the bat and make a determination on who had the ability to connect to the internet, who didn't. We wanted to actually find out who had computers and who didn't. A lot of the schools jumped out there, and some of the companies, Microsoft and other Google, started providing Google Chromebooks, Surface Pro, all types of cost-effective computer solutions started popping up, and they started providing them to the schools, and students started having those devices. It was a huge step forward because now at least we could make that engagement, but the challenge was a consistent engagement. Okay, we're connecting now, but okay, are we connecting once a week? Are we connecting once a day? How are we connecting? What are we doing to make to present a consistent engagement? Okay, and what we decided to do, every educator, every teacher had the ability to through their administration make determinations on how they wanted to engage. What we decided to do was to create a time block that was consistent with the time block that our students were currently here. Okay, and so we created a sign-in time and a sign-out time that was consistent. Our courses last roughly approximately 2 hours. There's a 2-hour time frame that we were able to then set up students to log in, and then during that period of time, that was the time set aside for them to engage. Now, there were challenges with that, in that we had to work with our faculty and make sure that they, the Zoom platform that we were using was not just the 40-minute limited version. We had to work with families and make sure they might have had challenges with parents' workflow times, parents also online, other students in the household needing to use the facilities, needing to use the equipment. So it wasn't a written in stone per se, but we wanted to say, this is the block of time, Monday through Friday, that you should log in, or that we will be available for connection. Thus, through connection, we can reestablish the opportunity to teach. And that's what we wanted to do. So we wanted to level that playing field, because so many students, when you remove them from the physical environment, the playing field is no longer level. It's just it was a rude awakening for us last year at that point, but it was no longer. So we had to work with the faculty, with the parents, with the families, to do all that we could to level that playing field. And so thus for us, the birth of Team Umizoomi. Okay, so I don't know how many of you might have young children that watch this particular cartoon, but I'm sort of the type of guy where I nickname things, and I nicknamed our AM class last year Team Umizoomi. They were coming in. It was their first year of engagement, and so we named them that, and they loved it. They loved the name of it. They still today like that, being referred to as that. And it was obvious to us because we were on Zoom, and there was a particular phrase in that song that says, "We go behind the scenes and we can do anything." In our class, part of our class in multimedia is we teach a branding component. And the logo that you see in the top right-hand corner was actually developed by students that's come through this course. And one of the taglines that they developed around that was "Make it happen." And we tried to embody that "make it happen" belief into this engagement. We recognized that students had been off. This is coming back into September now, and we had to create a long-term strategy, because our schools were sending the students back now in a hybrid manner. They were sending them back 3 days in school, 2 days off. 2 days off, 3 days in school. So we had to have a sustainable solution to be able to connect with them when they weren't here. So, that it's challenging enough, right? Well, let me just state it this way. When the students in the spring went home, let's be honest, then they were off all summer. Most of them were at home on digital devices. They couldn't go anywhere, but they weren't using the digital devices necessarily for educational purposes. So we had to give consideration to the paradigm shift of now them using their computer for educational purposes. So there was a learning curve associated with that, their focus, their etiquette. And we're going to talk about some of those things as we go forward. Okay, we had to make sure that each student had some type of computer, first of all, in the household that they could get on the Zoom and log in. That was our first step. Well, first, we had to make sure they had internet. In some instances, we actually challenged our OAC team, spoke with administration, and we were able to provide some of our older model computers that would at least allow the students to connect. We were able to allow them to take those home and use those to connect. In a couple instances, we had students that didn't have hotspots. We were able to direct them, or didn't have internet, to the libraries who were providing hotspots at no cost. There was a couple instances where that wasn't available. We were able to purchase a hotspot and allow the student to use that to connect. Because if for us, if we couldn't engage the student, then there is no education. So we had to knock down those barriers, do whatever it took to get in front of the student, not only for the purpose of education, but for the purpose of connection, for the purpose of their well-being, so they could have a consistent engagement and not get left behind. So when you look at the loaner computers and the hotspots, and we were able to address that through our administration and through our OAC committee, and just through our own innovative ways of addressing that. Okay, so that was exciting that we were able to do that. For example, one of our students last year was full-time virtual based upon their health challenges that they faced, would not and could not come into the classroom for the entire year last year. Turns out that student got to be our student of the year. So we were very proud of them. We were very proud of the effort that they put forth, and we were very proud of the environment that we were able to create through this engagement that allowed them to succeed. Now, one of the things that our administration did supply to us is the very camera that I'm using today and the speaker voice microphone. It's called a Huddle camera, and it has a camera on top that attaches or can attach various places in the room. It's portable. It can be moved around, and it gives a very, very good, very clear view. And you can turn the camera. It's on a swivel, and so you can provide different views if needed. Okay. And then what's nice about the microphone component is that I can get up and walk around, and as long as I'm able to, move and keep the microphone with me, I can hear the student when they talk, because if I'm connected to the Zoom, it'll come through this microphone, which projects throughout the room. Wherever I go, the other students can hear it. If I walk off a camera, they can still hear me talking and not be lost, because in some instances, you're dealing with the technology challenge of having students learn how to log into Zoom, learn how to use the computers this way. And sometimes you would have to individually engage while the group shows some patience and shows some etiquette in being able to understand how to behave on Zoom. So this was a nice set that our administration actually provided for us, and it went a long way in us being able to do what it is we were able to do. Okay, so let me see here. Let me demonstrate. For example, we have other computers set up, and we would then use the pin mechanism in Zoom, how you can pin a particular view. And if we knew that we were moving up to the front of the classroom and we were going to do something on our chalkboard, then when we come into that view, then we can do whatever, talk on the classroom, and that view would still be projected onto the screen, and you could still hear us talking on the microphone. And that was a very effective method of being able to address individual challenges while we were moving the group forward, or be able to utilize mainstream methods like writing on the chalkboard, something as simple as that. We could still do that, and it could still be effective. Obviously, our programs, we share them and we can show up on the screen. And so I could actually bring up programs that I can write or type in, and all of that is viewable and it is projected. We have two large monitors in our classroom at the very front of the classroom, which you can see in one of our classroom computers. So that's projected, that information is projected up to the front. So everything that's on the screen is also projected up to the two front screens in the classroom. So now what we've created is a synchronous environment where those that are coming in virtually are seeing what's on the shared technology, screen share, and then those that are in the classroom, this computer that I'm on it's projecting it through an HDMI cable up onto the monitors in the front of the class. So everyone is seeing the same thing at the same time. Everyone is hearing exactly what I'm saying at the same time. And as I move through the classroom, they can continue to hear me. And even if I go off camera for a minute, if they say something, I can hear them. So it became a very effective technique. And more importantly, the main reason why I initiated the alternate view cameras was for the sake of connection. When the students were able to log in, they could see, I would take attendance on who was in the classroom, and I would take attendance of who was on virtual. They could see each other and they could connect if they so desired. As the year progressed, maybe they took it for granted a little bit and didn't do it as much. But initially, they were looking for each other in the classroom. They were saying, who's here today? Who's physically in the classroom? Who's online? You know, and that connection that that was broken back in the spring of 2020 had been reestablished and restored. And this then made for a much better environment to teach. And the consistency going into that fall, into the 2020 school year, 2020-21 school year, the consistency of being able to have that block of time every day, not just, oh, you call me, check in, call and check in. That might work for some individuals, but for us, it worked to have a consistent block of time that the students knew, this is my time for class. This is the time I set aside. This is the time to engage. Okay. Other abilities. So I have this other camera. If I walked offline over here to the other view, if I needed to do an additional demonstration, I could do a demonstration over here with another piece of equipment that may not be available over there. If I had the 3D printer, if I wanted to use the 3D printer, I could bring this over so that we can see and teach what I'm doing there. Now, this does not at all replace the ability for a virtual student to do a performance task. In my case, it's all the one and the same. So I don't want to act as if everybody are going to have the same advantages. Like computer-based programs, our performance is the computer. But in certain instances, we have certain things like the 3D printer that they can't engage from the computer. But we can still do performance demonstrations. The students can then do a demonstration themselves in front of the screen, in front of the camera. And even though those virtually can't physically participate and do that, they can see it being done. And we can repetitiously do that with different students if we so desire, so that they can, when they do come back into the classroom, would be much better prepared and ready to go to perform that performance task. So that's a big additional way of utilizing that, utilizing this strategy to for performance-based lessons. Okay, because we know the cognitive, obviously, you know, substitution, we've used the pick rat strategy. You know, there's the ability to transform, you know, beyond substitution, or that might be the I might have that backwards. But anyway, the one use of technology, we don't want to just substitute, we want to transform. Okay, we don't want to just substitute putting a piece of paper on the screen and then showing someone and say that's an effective use. It can be in certain aspects, but we want to transform how we're engaging, how we're using the technology. So again, this talks about using the shared screen to do performance demonstrations, projecting on large monitors in front of the classroom. Both the in-person and virtual students can see the same content. Turn off camera zooms. Okay, so there was a whole thing about in recording. This was a big deal when we first started engaging. Okay, we can't record the students. All right, we got to be careful. So, but all you have to do is have the students turn off their cameras. And a more simplistic thing is I have the ability to control in my gallery panel my own image so that I can pare that down and only have my image visible there. Then I can record the session while I'm doing it, put it into my library as an effective tool that I can add. We use Canvas here at Forbes as a digital depository for all of our lessons and strategies. And we can then add that as a visual asset, a digital asset to correspond with that particular lesson. So we can record it right on the spot there. We were doing some animation in the spring last year when we actually had to break off the connection, and we recorded those sessions while we were Zooming from home initially, and though we still use those sessions today in conjunction with the lesson plans on 2D animation. So that was very, very effective. That's a very effective. So, you know, we should be concerned about the ramifications of recording students. I'm not belittling that, or I'm not trying to de-emphasize the importance of protecting their privacy. What I am saying is it's just as simple as changing the way the images show up before you hit the record button. And it's very simple, a simple method to do that. Okay, let me check my time. Okay, we're right around 30 minutes. Okay, good. We're doing good. All right, and also you can just, now I did give my students a little incentive. I did hear tell of some instructors making their students turn their cameras on. We want to see what they're doing. We want to make sure they're paying attention. Okay, so I took sort of a more lenient policy with that. I afforded them the ability to turn their cameras off as long as they responded when I called their name. I'm the type of instructor that I'll call your name. I'll just call randomly such and such, and I'll ask them questions, and I'll keep them engaged. And I think most instructors are doing that, do that type of thing. You're trying to do the informal assessment as you go along, checking in to make sure everyone's on board, that they're understanding. So they were on their P's and Q's because they knew I might call on them. So most of the time they were there. And so that was good. That was really good. Okay. So going into this slide here, students' learning curve, using the various software, computer itself for educational purposes. I mentioned that earlier on, but this was nevertheless a challenge. It was a challenge nevertheless, because again, we had, students, there's this assumption by a lot of people in my generation, I'm an older generation kind of guy, that all young people, because they use phones and devices, really understand this engagement of using, it just comes naturally. They're intuitive, they got it down, they got it figured out, but it's just not always the case. And so you can't just take that assumption there associated with them. You have to check in and make sure. So some of them were right on point with it. Others needed to be taken by the hand and needed to be shown directly how to do things and how everything connected, how it works, and different things of that nature. Okay, so and the other thing we had to talk about and make clear was computer etiquette. Okay, students asking permission to use the restroom, or leaving the virtual engagement space to go get a sandwich or something. I don't, hey, there was a benefit, because a hungry student is not focused on what I'm teaching. They could care less if the belly's rumbling, right? So if they can go get a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I'm the kind of instructor, go get your sandwich and come on back, okay? Because I want you paying attention to what I'm saying. So there was that, but we had to practice some respect. And we teach as a part of our client engagement, as a part of our teamwork and collaborative experience that the creative and design process facilitates or has is inherent. We teach the 30 tips of dignity and respect. These are principles that people can use in personal, in corporate, and group engagement to help help with communication, help with just being respectful and mindful of other human beings in how they, the principle is that everybody deserves dignity and respect. We have an additional links, anybody that's interested in learning how to do this, 30 tips, and somewhere in the process of the school, depending upon how our lessons flow, we pick a tip a day. We go over the tips, one each day for 30 days. And then our students at the end of that, they pick one of their favorite tips, and then they create a poster utilizing one of the Adobe Creative Suite programs. And then when they create the posters, then our administration allows us to put those posters up around the school promoting the 30 tips of dignity and respect. Very effective strategy, and it just helps them be mindful of each other. Tips like say thank you, tips like learning how to listen, tips like lead by example, tips like remember, we all make mistakes, okay? Resist the urge to point out the ones others make. Okay, so they're very effective strategies in terms of team engagement. And mentioning that team engagement, I'm going to go back because I think I missed the use of, I missed the use of somewhere in there. Oh, breakout rooms. Okay, we initiated breakout rooms at times when students break out into groups. We had a few design groups recently as we were doing some brand strategy, and we could break those students out in the breakout rooms of Zoom, and they can go into the rooms, engage each other, and have those conversations in small group settings about the particular focus of their group. It's a great strategy, a great focus with Zoom. I also like the polling that Zoom has if you want to set up a survey through Zoom. Now, these are things you can also do on Canvas as well, but I like the fact that it's built into the Zoom platform, and you're able to poll them on different things that you might want to implement, and they can chime in on that and make that and participate in that. Okay. Okay, so here's some additional resources. Here's how you can get the Chrome remote desktop. Now, the remote desktop, I'm going to talk about in the next slide here. So we'll get to that. But there's the dignityandrespect.org. Here's Common Sense. We also do a lesson on digital citizenship. It's a 10 lesson. We've selected 10 out of the, I don't know, they might have 30 actual lessons on commonsense.org. It is an OER website, open educational resources, which we are a big fan of. Is an open educational resource, commonsense.org, that has digital citizenship. It's just more information on how to engage and your digital footprint and citizenship, how to behave in the digital environment. And so we have that as well for the students to understand that, it's a part of their engagement here as a multimedia designer. So we have that in play as well. But not only that, they're using this now to learn. So we want them to understand that as well. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go to my breakout strategy that we stumbled into that really transformed our experience. Now, of course, a lot of the other things are transforming strategies as well, but this really sort of took us to another level from a multimedia perspective. Okay, so we had students that got Chromebooks and were excited because they could come on to Zoom and they could engage and they could connect, and we could give them some work, but we couldn't give them the link to be able to connect with their Adobe Creative Suite program, because Adobe Creative Suite, best case scenario, required them to have a computer with 16 gigabytes of RAM. Now, some of the we use Macintosh computers here, industry standard from the creative perspective. We use the Mac computers. Now, the Mac computers, based upon their setup and their formatting, can actually run it on 8 gigabytes of RAM. It's not ideal, but you can run it that way. The Adobe Creative, Adobe prefers that you have a minimum of 16 gigabytes of RAM. So obviously they had Chromebooks with 4. Chromebooks with 2 gigabytes of RAM, 4 gigabytes of RAM, right? No way they're gonna run those software programs. So you're sitting at home now, watching my demonstrations on the screen, can't actually effectively practice the strategies that I'm showing them. And the way we do it, we do a demonstration. Sorry, we're in the environment, okay? We do a demonstration and then we ask the students to do it along with us. So we demonstrate it, I'll do, you do, then we do, you know, or I do, we do, you do. That's how it works. And so we do that strategy. And so what came available to me is I started in one of my OAC meetings in the fall of 2021. Okay, I mean, of 2020, in the fall of 2020, in our OAC, one of our committee team members actually suggested, hey, did you think about remote desktop strategy? And I said, you know what, I'm familiar with it, but I didn't think about it from this use. So we started researching and we found out that Google Chrome had a remote desktop strategy that we then did a little research and found out that we could use to allow the students to log in from their Chromebook to our iMac in the class, access their files, access the software, and work along with the class synchronously. This was a major leap forward for us, okay? Couple workarounds we had to do is most of the schools were locking those Chromebooks down out of concerns for how the students would use them. And so one of the workarounds we used is we created a multimedia account, Google Gmail account, Google Chrome, Google account. And then we were able to log into the Google account in the browser, in the Chrome browser, and add the Google Chrome remote extension to the browser. Now, once we were able to do that, then the student at home could then change their sign-in. They could add the multimedia account, log in through the multimedia account, and then access the extension. And what the extension allowed, okay, what the extension allowed, I'll just come off of that for a second. The extension then allowed the student to access the other computers in the classroom. They could pick whichever computer they were working on, and they could log in to that computer. Okay, so if I pick one of these computers right here, let's just pick 29. Okay, we'll pick computer 29. Okay, it's going to want to connect. There's a pin. We just did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the number of the computer, 29. So then we were able to connect to the computer, and this is going to go on and on and on and on right there because of the fact that that computer is logged in as well to this screen. So you're able to see that go on and on and on, and it's doing that because of the fact that I'm logged in at the other computer to Zoom. I don't have another program uploaded there. But you can see immediately I was able to gain access to that particular program. And through access to that program, I could then open up the software that I wanted to open up and work on the Adobe Creative Suite. This was a major step forward for us because those students who did not have a high enough RAM computer at home could then log into computers here. And while they're logged into the computer here, I can sit in my station. I'm not sure if you can really tell, but I have a acrylic plexiglass I don't have a mask on or anything in the classroom, but I have a masked in area here at my station, which I am behind. I can look around the classroom from my view and see the screens, and I can see those who will be remotely engaged and see what they're doing and give them instruction from where I'm at. Okay, I have the ability to see all the screens in my room from my location, and I can give them instruction from my place of working, from my podium. So this was obviously a huge step forward for us. It was groundbreaking for us. The one challenge we faced, and we actually have some people at Google that we've talked to, we have a connect there that's helping us with this, but the audio part of the Google Chrome Remote Desktop, when we would use a program like Premiere Pro, which is a video production program, we could do everything in there that it required us to do, except when we went to adjust the audio, we couldn't hear it effectively. So we had to find a workaround for that. So they're working on that for us and how we can actually hear that. And we're excited to hear back from them shortly to be able to transform the engagement even more. Okay, so that brings us to sort of the end here. But for those non-computer-based programs, many people will say, well, you're a computer program, so you can use the strategy, it works for you. But you must consider or start thinking about ways that this strategy can work even if you're not a computer-based program. There are certain engagements, certain certification processes that you can oversee in this method. There are guest speaker workshops. The people at home and the people in this classroom can use through this process. Performance task demonstrations. You can still open up the demonstrate a performance task through your camera, broadcast it to people at home and people in the classroom who can see. Peer-to-peer breakout rooms and team engagement. You can do a lot of this even if your program is not an online type of program like multimedia is, where our performance is the use of the computer. So I'm going to wrap it up there, and I'm going to open up the remaining time here. I think it is, we got about 15 minutes left. If there are questions that were in the chat room, I'm willing to answer those, or any other point of references that anybody else may have at this time.
So Philip, back early out, you were talking about hotspots. I think you answered it later, but one of the, Wendy was wondering how you got access to funding to do hotspots. I know I heard you mention that you use libraries to get some hotspots, but any other ideas on how to get funding for those hotspots?
Well, one of the ways is make sure your OAC committee puts that in their OAC minutes and recommends that based upon the potential for this type of need to be around for a while. Okay, now a lot of people in the interim, a lot of communication companies have been making internet much more available. There's a lot of things that have come about as a result of the pandemic, but it's nice to have a couple on hand just in case. And I actually purchased one myself just to have. At that time, I couldn't wait for the budget to go around another year. We needed it right then and there. So I wanted to make sure it was effective. I also wanted to make sure students weren't just trying to blow smoke up my way, so to speak, and just saying they couldn't access the internet, So, okay, well, here's a hotspot. Let me come and, let's make sure we can get that connected. All right. And the one student who used that particular hotspot was a senior, not the senior I spoke of earlier, but they were a senior that used that just did not have internet. They were not able to afford that at the time. And through that, they were able to get their NOCTI done. They were able to get prepared for the senior presentation, and they were able to graduate. So I think the value of that presented itself, and then we included them in our OAC going forward the next year.
Are there any other questions from participants that Philip could answer?
And I'm available. Like if anybody wants to call and speak more individually, they have my contact information. I believe they have it. Feel free to reach out with questions, with ways of thinking. I'm more than willing to help others think about ways that they can transform their engagement. We still have students this year who are full-time virtual. We have a couple that are this year. We don't have as many hybrid, but we're not offering hybrid as a solution this year, but there are certain situations in which students are out for long dated periods of time that can then utilize this strategy to not get behind.